Nez, welcome to Realistic Happiness Podcast.
Thank you. Super stoked to be here.
So if I'm tuning into this episode and I want to learn something new today, what am I going to learn from you?
Well, I think something that's bubbling up in organisations in the current space is people wanting to feel significant but feeling insignificant at work. Why people are scared to speak up and how organisations silence themselves. We'll also go into the dark side of leadership, one of my favourite topics.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. I want to talk first about being invisible at work because I'm sure you've been there, I've been there. It feels horrible just having passion, having a voice, getting hired to do something, and then you just feel inadequate.
Yeah.
You feel like you cannot speak up. So what's your experience been? And you work in HR, right? I'm sure you've seen this as well with other people.
Yeah. I think it depends who it is and why they feel invisible. So even though the world of diversity, equity, inclusion is going into some funky spaces and backwards, I think for a lot of us, it's still key. And I think one of the first times people can feel invisible is when there's not inclusion safety, where they feel like, can I be myself here? And I've had this in the past, and I talked to numerous people in different organisations, my organisation, where they might identify with being part of a different group, whether they're neurodivergent, whether they're from a different culture or religion, and there's that fear, and it might not be the fear of this organisation they're in, but the baggage and the trauma we carry from other organisations of, can I be myself here? And so maybe that's that first level of invisibility, not bringing different parts or identities that are important to us. And I think that second part of feeling invisible often comes from, in my mind, I'm thinking through a model, which is Timothy R. Clark's psychological safety level. So there's inclusion safety, then there's learner safety. Can I learn, make mistakes and do different things? There's contributor safety. Can I speak up? And then there's challenger safety. Do I have the courage and is it safe for me to challenge the status quo? And I think people feel invisible where one or more of these types of psychological safety aren't present.
I was just thinking back to when I didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
And the challenging one is a big one where you feel like you can't challenge the status quo or like what's going on, and like you feel like you're not safe enough to be like, hey, is this the right direction? Like, are we okay? Like, should we not be doing this? And that can be really challenging.
It's scary. And I think back to feeling visible is, can I contribute? And then also I think most people, we're talking about realistic happiness. Does everyone need to be in their perfect role? Is every company going to be purpose-driven? Maybe not. I think people derive more happiness or fulfillment from, am I doing meaningful work? And often I think people feel a sense of tiredness, not a sense of feeling valued or recognised when their work is not meaningful as well. And I think that's the really hard part, is how do you find meaning as an employee, and how do companies create meaningful work? And for me, that always will go back to the job of a leader.
Yeah, asking yourself, does any of this matter? Does what I do matter?
It's a pretty big revelation when you have it, because sometimes, your company might not be making the biggest impact on the world, or even maybe, causing whatever it is, pollution, or kind of just net not doing anything of real significance in your opinion. But every day, are you coming in and feeling, I matter, the work I do helps my colleagues, or in that small way? And I think maybe this is a little bit cynical, but I don't think all of us can be doing purpose-driven jobs in the bigger sense of maybe like types of NGO work or saving the planet or working with different populations. How do we still help people find meaningful work and feel visible? And for me, there's an inner critic and an inner work that needs to happen. But I think too often we place the responsibility on individuals to feel better, secure. What about the system? How are leaders and the broader ecosystem, governments, VC investors, shareholders creating systems that allow people to work at a natural pace or do meaningful work as well? So I think it's time to stop putting all the hacks and tips on individuals and start changing the workplace as leaders, because quite frankly, to retain people, they need to feel valued and like they're doing something that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So the speaking your truth and coming as your full self to work. I feel like it's not the greatest advice because some, like you said, some companies, the system aren't even ready for that. So I can imagine as an individual, if I'm not supported by being able to challenge people or like you said, by being inclusive and accepting me as a neurodivergent woman who's Italian, who doesn't speak English as a first language, I don't have my community there. I don't have my tribe there. So I felt like every time I went to a workplace, it wasn't like set up for me.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're asking for too much, doesn't it? Like for the company to like tailor to your like ideal scenario.
Yeah.
So it does feel like it's scary to like ask and like wait for a response. Like, so normally you just don't ask. You're just scared.
Yeah. If I'm truly honest with you, I don't have a silver bullet for what this looks like. As an employee, I was like, yes, it should be more inclusive and they should create places. Then now that I lead a HR function, actually looking at how do you create environments where everyone belongs, but you've also got to realize that there's different people's identities that can clash with each other. I think the biggest thing is when it comes to politics or certain religions, which most companies are just like taboo, let's not touch this, or they just don't want to have a stance. If everyone brought their full selves to work, that would be really hard because there's people who might need to work together and those identities or ideologies clash. So then the question becomes, well, how much of yourself can you bring to work? And what is the hierarchy of identities that can be their full selves? So I think, most of the diversity space and inclusion goes around, yes, women at work, people of colour, people of neurodivergence, people that are differently able-bodied. So what does it actually look like on the surface level or the visible level to bring yourself to work? And then I think why this is so hard is because no one's cracked the nut of how do you create a space where everyone is included and there's different systems that support them. I will always go back to this, and I've talked to you a lot about this. It always will come back to leaders because a system can be designed to include people. And if a leader creates an unsafe space or a space where people don't belong, either for their ideas or their demographies, either consciously or unconsciously, it doesn't matter what's on the website or what ideals HR puts out there. It's up to leaders to educate themselves to create spaces where people can belong.
Yeah, and it's so tough because, like you said, with the hacks and stuff, like as an individual, you are really trying, right? As a professional, you're conforming to the system, to your job, to your boss, saying, yes, I'll take the workload, I'll do this and that. I'll come to the office, I'll be professional in the workplace, etc. But then if it is a leadership problem, that's tough because a lot of leaders I worked with, for example, are quite stubborn because they are in that position for a reason.
Yeah.
It's hard to admit to yourself as well. Like I've had it when I was managing a team. I thought I was doing a good job. And then my team member pulled me aside and she was like, you're micromanaging me? And I was like, this was a few years ago. And I was like, me? But I have empathy. I'm nice. I'm like, I'm millennial. Like we fuck with each other.
Yeah.
We vibe. And then, no, but she really brought it to my attention. It was something so minuscule about an email. Basically, I had to look over emails before sending them. Yeah. But I thought I was protecting them because I knew that we were dealing with Hong Kong and they were very specific with how you worded things. We didn't want to like insult people and stuff. It was a different culture. So I was like, okay, I know kind of what how they like to be communicated. So I was like the filter. But then my team saw it as micromanagement, that I was like the other layer of like approving the email before it's being sent. Like they didn't have the autonomy. And that's another thing with safety is having autonomy to be treated like an adult, to do your job.
I find this space, I'm so glad you brought up micromanagement. I find it really a tricky space to be in. What I'm noticing is there's so many on social media or like talks on, I think you posted something really lovely today or yesterday around, most people leave because of micromanagement, leave managers. I don't know where to sit on this because, yes, no one wants to be micromanaged. I really like the idea of a leader says, here's the North Star, here's where we go, but I've hired you as an amazing person to figure out how. And so that level of stepping back. But there's certain times where some people are more at the start of their career, don't have the experience, where you need to guide them further. And that might look like micromanagement to other people. And so what happens is I think something even scarier or as scary as micromanagement is happening. And it's some people, leaders being so scared of being labeled micromanagers that they're flipping the other way and not giving that level of coaching or direction. And that really goes with every leader building a team charter or a social contract with their team to say, what are our ways of working? When will I need to kind of step in? Because you're right, in that sense, maybe you really needed to go in and look at that, but it's explaining the why and the how of why this needs to happen. Like, look, I'm trying to protect this. They might say, look, Daisy, I don't really need you to do this. We've got a template. We got it looked at by legal or whatever. So it's the unspoken part. But what I would hate to happen in leadership is a lot of leaders actually not stepping into holding people accountable, giving clear direction because they're scared of being called micromanagers. So I think that's the flip side. But yeah, I still think micromanagement comes from a deep place of fear and insecurity from leaders who haven't learnt the craft of managing and leading, because they're two different pieces.
Yeah, it's one of these words that gets overused as well. Like, even if you are just doing your job and stepping in for something, that gets called micromanagement.
Yeah.
When it's actually like, no, like, this is the direction, this is what we're supposed to do, there was a mistake, etc. Like, I need to intervene. I need to step in.
Well, I think it's also sensing where a team is. So when I was at Miro, I led a global function, and we looked at a lot of the culture portfolio, learning and development, and one of the sub-teams I had was a team of agile coaches. And so what we went and did was across the organisation would either work with different people, business partners or leaders to see which teams were in the red from an engagement and performance perspective and which teams were really in the green, and how could we change, like how the teams that were doing well, how could we amplify that, and the teams that were struggling, why was that and what could we change? But based on this, we built sort of a model. It was a 2x2, and we saw, okay, as a leader, there's something called situational leadership, but we built something called situational teaming. So as a leader comes in and a team is together, is that team high performance, low performance, and are they high collaboration, low collaboration? And so if they're high collaboration, low performance, sometimes they're in consensus chaos. So the leader needs to move them into actually delivering and doing things. Like, you know, you might like each other, but if you're not delivering, that doesn't work. And so what we saw was sometimes the leader had to figure out, can they get people out of consensus chaos or bureaucracy, and can they get them into being an empowered team or a highly directed team? And neither of those are wrong, but a leader has to sense, do I go and give people more, not fully micromanagement, but really be like, I need to check that email, I need to do this. Yes, sometimes you will need to move into that space and be more highly directive as a leader based on maybe that team is quite junior and inexperienced. Maybe that team is just in their forming stage, so you need to give people more direction and then you can pull away. And other times you might just be people have complete autonomy because they've been together as a team for a while. They're really experienced or gelling well together. So I think that's the problem, is we think there's a black or a white, and often it's up to the leader to be like, who am I in my journey as a leader? Where is the team in their journey as a team? And then how do I apply the right level of guidance and autonomy?
Yeah, I can imagine even if you're a new leader or you've been doing this for a while, just having that conversation with yourself is tough, because at the end of the day is like we keep kind of mentioning, is about communication, over communication, over interference versus under communication, and just expecting people to read our minds and understand what we're trying to convey. And I think what comes into that is also like in like not communities, but like in the workplace, particularly in meetings or like town halls. Like I found myself like holding back my thoughts because I felt like I was too much, or like freezing, you know, if someone just picks on you and says like, oh, Ness, what do you think about this? And you're just there like, shit, like, do I conform and just say, yeah, that's good? Or like actually say how I feel? So you mentioned before about the physiology of fear in the workplace. So what's actually happening to our bodies when we're being challenged or they pick on us and they're like, what do you think?
Well, caveat, I'm not a neuroscientist. My background is in psychology and a bit of neuroscience, but I think a lot of that idea of the amygdala has been talked about, but it's a part in the center of the brain. And what happens when we're either having a fear or an anxiety response when someone comes to us is that part of the brain fires up and it creates a reaction where we have cortisol and adrenaline go through our system, and then people might have heard of fight, flight, flee response, or fawn response, freeze, response. And so I think that's going through the body. You're actually having a physiological change. People might feel like their heart going, sweaty palms. And so I think when that happens, people actually try and fight their physiology or just stay in that state and think there's something wrong with them. For me, the question is, why do you feel fear? Or when someone asks you and puts you on the point, and it's going into, where did that come from? Because it can't be the first time that's happened. Did something happen in the past where someone asked you to speak up and you spoke up and you were reprimanded or embarrassed or made to feel silly? Or I was at this great panel talk with a neuroscientist, and we were talking about psychological safety, and I learnt from him that when you see someone else, for example, someone else spoke up and they got ridiculed or something happened to them, the neuroscience and psychology actually passes on to you, where you're like, oh, that fear is felt by you as well. So I think that's what's happening. Like, physiologically there's changes. The question then becomes, what do you do with that? Do you just observe that? Do you try and just go against that through exposure therapy or different types of work? So I think that's what's happening in the body. The question becomes, what now and what next? And for me, it's really when I have these responses, whether it's around the fear response, there's anger, there's different feelings in the body. Normally there's that saying of what resist persists. So now I tried something different, which is I actually just go into the space and feel it. And it's really awkward. But I'd say a lot of the times as humans, the reason that we have different behaviors that aren't great, like passive aggressiveness or anger or some of our verbals, is because we don't want to feel our emotions, or we shove it down with, different things. People might go out for more coffees or a cigarette or drink, is actually feeling your emotions. So now it's kind of that feel the emotion. I just say what's happening in my body right now. Like, someone puts me on the spot, or I might see a behavior that was like a past aggressive boss. I just kind of feel it in my body, and then I rewire my brain, just be like, you're safe. This is okay. If I truly know it's not okay. But as we know, there's like at least 60 to 70% of people have experienced some sort of workplace trauma. So it's when you're having that fear response and you feel the physiology, is actually just taking that moment for yourself, really sensing, is this safe or unsafe? And then just telling your brain it's okay, because otherwise it doesn't know. It's keeping a past response to protect you.
It's so validating, because have you seen there was like a lot of TikTok videos of people going on Zoom calls and like literally shaking like this, and they were like, this is not normal. Why am I shaking like I'm about to get hit by a car by going on a Zoom call? So I can also totally relate. I've had like circumstances where it's either a Zoom call or I had to like speak, like present in front of my peers, and it's like people I know, but just like, clearly something in the past has traumatized me, right? Yeah. That either someone else went through it or I went through it, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm never doing that. And then I get put in the position, I'm like, I don't want to do it, no. And then you get shakes, sweaty, you can't speak coherently because you're just in your head. And I guess.
How did it go when you did the talk?
No, it goes fine. Yeah. And then it's just kind of like, you just feel like, why am I feeling like this? It's just work. It's just work.
I mean, there's so many reasons for different people. I think for a lot of us, I can speak for myself, but different people I have coached, like particularly women in technology and women in the workplace, there's a fear of getting it wrong and not being good. I was having a beautiful chat with some women this week, and there was that idea of people who are perfectionists or recovering perfectionists, and that idea of like it can't go wrong. Even in times if people haven't been reprimanded, is there something in either their childhood or their workplace where it's like it has to be right. And I was like that for a long time based on childhood, based on schooling, based on working in Big Four consulting, where it's a very high performance, no error environment. And then I, had different ways of working, particularly when you learn agile ways of working, having a minimum viable product, doing something called shitty first drafts, just getting something out there. But that moment for me a couple of years, or maybe 7 years ago, was, I'm not sure if you've heard Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way.
Yes.
I love The Artist's Way. And then she has like a saying in there, to truly be good at something, you have to understand that you will be bad at it first. And I think now it's just when that physiology or that fear happens, it's just kind of knowing as long as it's safe and you have leaders who have a safe environment, just like embrace that you'll suck. And that's what I do now is just I'll let my team embrace that you might suck at the first attempt, but at least there's something down on paper, on a board, there's something done, and you can just keep getting better. But I think it's that part of the fear, is it within us and we can do something? Is it part of the system? And as an individual, how can you control what you can control? And then how do you influence changing the system as well?
A part of perfectionism as well is like not only getting things right, but also I find saying yes, people pleasing, right?
Yeah.
And always saying yes to my boss. Even like if my boss was like, how are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm drowning in work, but no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. What else have you got for me? And I find that's is the difference from like speaking up and actually saying like, no, I'm doing too much.
Yeah.
I have a limit, I have a boundary, versus being a yes person in the workplace. Is so tough. And also it's to avoid conflict, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you just say yes and you just get on with it and you don't speak up, you're not an issue, right? It's an issue to you, obviously, but you can suffer silently until you explode.
Well, it's kind of that, I think it's a little bit more old school. Maybe it still exists in some organizations where they're like, to get further opportunities, say yes to things and take things on. And so growing up, I was like, okay, say yes. And then you just have more and more things. And then one of my bosses taught me about the achievers paradox, where you're like really good at 2 or 3 things. And they're like, oh, go to Ness, go to Daisy. They're really good at doing stuff. So you're doing 3 things well. And now someone else asks you to do a 5th, 4th thing, 5th thing, 6th thing. There's no way you're going to do 6 things well with the same time, same energy and same quality as 3 things. But you keep saying yes, and then you're like, I can't, for me at least, it was like, I can't let anyone down. So I'd burn the midnight oil, deprive my time from family, from friends, from activities, exercise, to do 6 things really well. And you're like, what's going on here? Like, it doesn't make sense. So I think there's that part of saying yes because you got told it would be good for your career. They're saying yes because you're afraid to say no. And the big part of that's going into fear of conflict as well. But there's also that part in organizations, back to the start where we're talking about like inclusion and having diverse people of all kinds of people, is you don't want it. Some people are seen as troublemakers if they don't say yes, or they don't, they're hard to work with, or she's really difficult. And so people don't want to be labelled. So you're like, and that might not be, once again, the workplace you're in, but we carry past baggage and traumas to our current place of work.
Absolutely. And I'm such an advocate for boundaries and saying no. If your limit is like, if it's just spilling and it's too much what you're doing, you're saying yes too much. And I went to a talk recently where the person speaking said, oh, if you want to get promotions, like setting boundaries isn't good.
Yeah.
Because you're pushing work back on your boss.
Yeah.
Like there's too much to go around.
Yeah.
You've set boundaries and said, no, this is my limit. And then it goes back on your boss. And your boss will see that as like, oh, okay. Like they're not a team player. And I agree to some extent. I do see it like if you say no, then of course they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to go to someone who says yes.
Yeah.
So that can harm like promotion because your boss is your advocate.
Yeah.
They have to go to the board or whatever and say, Daisy needs a promotion. Nez deserves a promotion because they are going above and beyond. But then for mental health sake, you do need to draw a line. You need to say, geez, like I can do 3 things well, but not 6.
Yeah.
Otherwise it goes into my social time, personal time. evenings, weekends?
It's a really tough one. I think sometimes, firstly, it's how we say no. If they're like, oh, Daisy, can you please help me out by just reviewing this document or just putting this slide together? And you're like, no, I can't do it. I need to go at 5. I think, some leaders struggle with that, and there's intergenerational differences, or there's just different work ethic differences or expectations. So I think knowing how to say no, for example, in that scenario, it's kind of like, hey, I've got these 3 things on. I'm happy to help you with that. How should I deprioritize or reprioritize these things? Because what you're saying is, I can't do it all. I've got those 3 things. Can you help me think through this, as opposed to a blank no? I'm not sure I fully agree with the sentiment of if you have boundaries, you won't progress. I think that we need to go into a smarter place together, which is, what is the workload? What are the true priorities? And thinking with your leader as truly, if you have that autonomy and you're proactive, it's like, how do we rethink work? That's something I'm doing with my team. Because I'll be honest, Daisy, I've been honest with our CEO. I've been honest with the team. It's like, I do not know what work-life balance or what healthy hours look like in a tech scale-up. Because you're find product market fit, you're trying to be have first mover advantage. Everyone knows generally people work really hard in tech scale-ups. They hope that they've got some equity, they'll go to IPO, and then they're like, then I can have a rest and have a mini retirement. It's like the game of tech scale-ups. It's the world. And now I'm thinking now, okay, we need to move at pace. There's so much that needs to be done. Can we look at things differently? So I had a chat with my team. I'm reading a book by Cal Newport. He did deep work, but his newest book is Slow Productivity. And we're now just running a series of experiments of what do we do, but it's up to me as the leader, instead of getting people to say no to me, thinking, how do we rethink how much we commit to in the organisation? How do I chat with the rest of the executives to say, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, and then putting systems in place, having a backlog of work of all of the items every 2 weeks or every month, whatever people want to do, reprioritising with people, looking at, okay, if we said we'd do 1, 2, and 3, what extent, what does good look like? What does done look like? Because it might not look like 100% platinum quality. It might actually look like, let's just deliver a bronze level prototype and get that out there. So I think all of these things shift work. And if leaders and teams actually figure that out together, workload should get better. I'm running the experiments. So 3 that we're doing at the moment is daily focus. So I think I've listened to a few of your podcasts with different neuroscientists on the state of flow and productivity. So I've really asked, based on Cal Newport's work, one of his items of slow productivity is do fewer things. It's the hardest one. So every day I'm like, apart from meetings, what is one thing? And we all have on our focus Slack channel, the one thing we're going to focus on, and nothing else apart from meetings, to see if we get into flow and get it done. The other thing I'm doing is taking every second Friday, quote unquote, out of office to zoom out as a leader and work on the company rather than in the company, and look at the dynamics of where can my team add more value by doing less and maximizing a few things that actually make the biggest impact. So I think it's up to leaders to create that space. And then it's up to team members to question, say, how do we, instead of saying, no, I can't do this, what is the biggest value I can do right now? What won't be done? And I think it's up to teams to figure that out together. But saying you can only progress if you do more is going to keep us in a very industrial revolution type of work for knowledge workers. It's not going to be sustainable.
Even in tech, is impossible for us with human bodies, physiology, to keep up with tech, keep up with AI. We can utilize it, like Slack channels, like ChatGPT, whatever, to automate and scale. But we need to take care of ourselves, because as we see time and time again, like even in Japan, even in China, etc., they literally have terminologies for people committing suicide because of work. Yeah. Like people are just tired. They're exhausted. They die either because their bodies give up because of burnout, that's been proven time and time again, or they take their own lives. Like it's becoming critical, and now we want to work. Like we like what we're doing, but not every hour of the day.
Yeah, and it's such a tough one. I think there's sometimes systems that make it happen. We're in a capitalistic model. There is like go, 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 the hope for a reward, or you'll get a raise. Or I think the scarier part, and I'll be vulnerable in talking about my journey, is where maybe the system's not asking for it. The company, is high performance, but it's you. You can't let go because you've tied so much of your self-worth to work. And it's kind of like, why do we do that? And, there's parts probably of childhood, different work environments, but maybe there's just this unpicking, and I see it in different high-performing team members. It's their inability to say no, even when I'm like, actually, you need to slow down and do fewer things. We don't need to do that. That extra piece, I'm not huge on going the extra mile. I'm huge on doing fewer things, looking at the quality and delivering value and not killing yourself. Because I often say to team members, for me, success doesn't look like you doing 20 things and burning out and then not being here in a year. Success looks like you doing meaningful work and us all being together as a cohesive team in a performing state. So I think there's a lot of work that people need to do. And I worked with a coach and a therapist of like, how do I decouple that sense of I matter and I'm relevant with work? And how can I be in a healthy place of I love my craft? Because I don't know, some people like, they don't love work. I love what I do. And my pursuit is to make work suck less for people through the craft of HR and people, the people space. I think for others, that's a personal journey that they'll need to go on with whatever guidance that feels right for them. But something funny will happen when the system isn't asking for it and you still can't stop.
Yeah, the dark side of leadership and also the dark side of high performance.
High performance, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine because I've been there. There's definitely some elements of trauma, personal, where you were not seen or heard, or you were hiding parts of yourself, or you were punished for enjoying XYZ. And then finally getting a job and then, getting a pat on the back, getting some praise, that's dopamine. And, okay, I want more
you feel
of that.
seen. And then you connect, if I just keep working hard and achieve this thing, the dopamine, it's an addiction of a different kind, performance is. I always ask teams that I lead, how do you recognize and reward yourself? More, how do you give yourself affirmation? Because so many people are like, yes, you want affirmation from this senior leader or your team. And I often say to people, sometimes it doesn't come. It should. I truly believe in environments that have more positive feedback than just criticism. But there's reasons it doesn't. People are busy. People forget. It doesn't come naturally to them. And let's be honest, there are some people who are jealous and envious and don't want to give people the feedback. There's dark sides of it. And it's something I learned earlier on in my career was at a certain point, you have to know you are doing a good job without the affirmation of others.
Yeah.
And so now every team I've led in the last probably 7 years, it's either on a digital whiteboard or a space where we give each other warm and fuzzies or kudos. And then there's one sticky note or colour, and people find it deeply uncomfortable initially where they have to give themselves praise. And I think that is the shifting moment where you're like, okay, yes, we all have gaps. We're not good at things, but I know that I'm good at what I do. It's a monumental shift in people. And it starts for me decoupling part of that sense of self-worth always being given to you, because you're really giving your power away where you always need affirmation from other people. So now if I get it, I was like, awesome. But every day I know I'm on a growth journey. I'm on a purpose journey. I'm doing what matters. And if it impacts and helps other people, then that's awesome. But if not, keep committing to your craft.
100%. Just having that foundation where you trust yourself and you know you're delivering good work within the hours. You don't have to do extra. You don't have to go above and beyond. You don't have to work through your lunch break just to prove you are a decent human being and a good colleague.
And I think that you just said something beautiful there. I often have that question is, do you trust yourself? And do I trust myself? Because then the answer is if you don't, then someone knows like there's a clear sign to do something. But other times when people are like, yeah, actually I do trust myself, and that unlocks the next set of steps for them, which is, okay, put the tools down, or no, go deeper into my craft and get lost in a sense of flow for 2 hours.
Yeah. And what's really worrying, because I've had to research with like Gallup studies, McKinsey, etc. And the number one criteria for people to have meaningful work is recognition.
Yeah.
So that's, in a way, I saw it as a good thing. So I was like, yeah, we need recognition to feel happy, but we need recognition to feel happy at work.
Yeah.
That's worrying from what you've said.
Well, I think it's exactly, well, it's worrying in terms of you need to find that for yourself, but we do need systems that have it. So we're currently redesigning at the company I work with at the moment, Gorilla, our performance process. And yes, we want to be a high-performing organisation, but how do we really look at performance as a motivator for people to grow their craft and their skill set? And that will help the company, and also performance to help us make clear decisions around progress. And what I've been talking to different leaders about is we can't tell people and expect them to be performing without making sure that we're recognising them in the smallest and the largest ways as well. You can't have that as a company or leadership. Everyone perform, but you're very light on the recognition of why people come to work to make a difference with each other, or for their organisation, or for the world. So if people want high performance and you're not creating and you're not thinking, how do I actually create a system of recognition? It's very one-sided and it's not going to work.
And it sounds like you're going above and beyond for your team as a leader, right? And I want to talk about the dark side of leadership, because I can imagine if I was in a leadership position and I knew I had to do all these things in order to ensure my team is not only performing sustainably, but they're looked after, and there's a lot on my shoulders essentially for like the company to move forward and my team to be happy and healthy and okay. I can imagine there's a dark side to leadership from that, because I reckon people cut corners. I reckon people will focus on one thing, like the company's growth over how their team feels, and kind of dismisses it or isn't. I had a previous boss who was never available, you know, to talk or have feedback, because it was all about the company. It's all about the growth. It was all about the bigger mission, the bigger thing. And I think he was hoping that would be enough for all of us to like show up and be part of the mission, when in fact we wanted validation, reassurance, recognition as well. So I want to talk to you more about the dark side of leadership. I know, it's exciting. Yeah. You have to lead yourself in order to be a leader, right?
Yeah. I think there's a beautiful model, which is leading self, leading team, leading organisation. I think it comes from the Centre of Creative Leadership, but it's a well-known model. And what they never talk about, or I haven't seen, is looking at the percentages of those buckets. If I was going to put a percentage, I would say 70 to 80% of leadership is leading self. Yes, you need to learn the tools to lead others in organisations of management and leadership. So how to strategize, how to plan, how to coach, how to motivate, how to do performance reviews, and all of those bits. And they're skills that you can learn and hone and practice. And I'm not saying they're easy. I'd say the 80% of leading self, though, is how do you turn up in each of those scenarios? What are some of the dark sides that one feels at all levels, whether you're a first-time leader or a senior leader, around insecurity? How do you deal with emotions that crop up when you miss deadlines, whether you have anger or frustration? How do you deal with it when team members come to you with a piece of feedback? So I'll give you one of my hardest as a leader. I don't think this person still knows, but one day I thought I was doing a great job. I was probably 26 at the time, leading a small team on a client consulting project. But I was like, same, sort of really busy, trying to please the client, having chats with my team, and clearly I wasn't listening. So one day I go to her desk, because I was like, thought she was doing a great job, to drop off like a little present. And I actually saw a list with like all the things why Ness isn't listening. And it had like a whole list. And I think she had done it to go and talk to another leader about me, to how do I work with Ness better? And it's like, rookie mistake as a first-time leader is not realizing the work is not doing the work and pleasing other people. The work is the team. The work is unblocking the team, spending time with them, and creating both team health and team impact around performance. So I think it's that ability of that example is like, what do I do with that? How do I internalize that feedback? Do you get angry as a leader and you're like, or defensive? Do you almost go the other way and just be like, I'm bad as a leader? So how do you deal with the emotions as a leader? How do you deal with shifting? Like, I can't even imagine for some of the leaders as well, like myself in the last 5 years, you've got a pandemic, there's been geopolitical unrest. Like, how do you deal with all of that? The cost of finance or capital has gone up, so people have had to do layoffs. There's so many things, and if you're not looking at your inner world and what you bring as a leader, there's going to be some dark sides in how you're dealing with dark emotions, uncomfortable emotions, and also just your ability to be present and perform as well.
I think people sometimes get thrown into a leadership position because it's the only way they can go up in the career ladder. Don't necessarily want it.
Yeah.
You know, they're not fit, they're not ready. It's almost like parenting.
Yeah.
Like, you're not ready, you're not prepared, you're not willing to do the inner work.
Yeah.
In order, because I think it radiates, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think there's two things. Like in our organization and many tech scale-ups, like you decouple the pathway so you can grow as an individual contributor or a leader and the salary bands are the same. I think that's one of the easiest ways to decouple it. So you get people who want to do the craft of leadership and management being in that pathway, and people who don't want to do it, it's like you can still grow and have salary by not doing it. I think that's one of the smartest things a company can do is decouple that risk. I think for other people, they want to be leaders. They're like, I love most of the leaders I talk to, first-time leaders or very experienced, they love helping other people. They love human potential. They love, seeing how teams can work together. I love the craft of leadership, of looking at how you get a team from forming, storming, norming to performing, how you get teams having healthy debate and conflict together to create magic. And I think a lot of people come into leadership for prestige or title. Sometimes leadership sucks at times. Like, it is one of the hardest roles. You're on a pedestal, but you're also pointed out when things go wrong and things don't work. There's often whispers behind you, like people's backs as well, or the leadership team. It's a really tough role. So I think people need to commit to it and then go back into, how do I stay in this space where things are hard? How do I go back into my internal world? And, I think not enough leaders actually spend regular time reflecting on their inner world and their leadership around leading self. And I'd say, I was saying this to someone before, as a leader, if you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. Because quite frankly, it is one of the biggest roles that damages people's self-esteem, their sense of self-worth, is when a leader has actions, is tired, snaps at people because they haven't paused to think, what is leadership? And I think there's that book, Why Should Anyone Be Led by You? And it's a hard question that I got asked when I first became a leader. And in one of the things that they say in that book is, there's a lot of leaders, there's not a lot of leadership, because people take it for the wrong reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can think of a couple of people in my head who took it for the wrong reasons. What are the other dark sides? I'm sure there's so many that we haven't covered.
I think a lot of leaders, when they're first-time leaders, because I do discovery and design leadership programs, it's that insecurity of, do I belong here? Will people listen to me? Either they've been someone's peer and become a leader, or at a certain time, this also happens for experienced leaders, they have, the way you build high-performing teams is you hire people better than yourself in your gaps or in different areas. So then there's insecurity of people who've talked, will people listen to me? Am I worthy? Am I better? I've heard people like, will they take my job? There's all of these dark sides. So then a leader, if they're not doing the inner work, it's where we often see passive aggressiveness or leaders who push other people down. And I'd say earlier in my career, it was really sad that one of the consulting firms I worked with, you'd see some of the leaders, and unfortunately sometimes it was female leaders, pushing other people down because of their own insecurities is the story I make up or what I observed. And then I flipped to another company and the female leaders were just they were already looking at their next stretch or what they were going to do next. And they were just trying to pull us all up and coach and guide us. And I think the difference between those two sets of people is that sense of self-worth of what you're doing and doing the inner work. I know that some of those leaders at that second place I work would actually go and do inner work because they're the ones who taught me around, whether it's journaling. One of the leaders, she's one of my sponsors and mentors, was the golden triangle. have a coach, have a mentor, have a therapist. Because as a leader,
wow.
it's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing this person is just a force with nature even now in the world. And so I think they're some of the dark sides of the insecurities, which often then go into narcissism for leaders where they need to make themselves bigger and push people down. I also think that's when the micromanagement comes from. Why do you need to control and oversee? If you've put the systems of work in place, then you shouldn't need to do that. It's that level, once again, I think it's leaders needing to feel significant. Because if you're leading well, you're creating the soil and the environment for other people to grow and flourish and shine. And I think leaders also struggle with then what's my role? The other side of the dark side of leadership is leaders taking credit for other people's work. Once again, it comes with the insecurity. If they think my team member did it, then am I relevant? I think these are the darker emotions, because otherwise people just talk about behaviors, micromanagement. Why are people doing it? Everyone wants to feel significant and relevant. I think this is Brené Brown work. People want to feel relevant and they don't want to feel shame. So I think that other dark side of leaders not being able to credit their team, you lose the team. And I often say if you lose the team, you lose the game.
You won't be a leader. You have no one to manage anymore.
Yeah. And then I think one of the other sides, I always think, why do we actually have these dark emotions, or they're not uncomfortable emotions? So jealousy, envy, regret, shame. Evolution's not stupid. They must be there for a reason. So I often think they're there to coach and guide us. So I think everyone could say, sometimes I feel envy. I was like, oh, I wish I could do that. Or you feel that pang. Often I think there's, once again, the artist's way. It's a signal. And I think Julia Cameron talks about a jealousy map. So it's like, what are you feeling? And often you're not jealous of a person. You're jealous of a thing that they have done or represent. And that's actually a guide to what you really want or what's missing from your space. And imagine if every leader just took time to say, what am I feeling? How do I map what's happening in my body and my mind? And what signal is that giving me of the true gap or gain that I need? I think that's the flip of the dark side. That's where the dark side helps you come into the light side of yourselves. I think too many leaders don't take time to stop because, like you said, your former leader was always worried about the business, the performance, the financials, because people don't realize the job of leadership is team health and team impact. Team health and team impact will help you get to company performance as well.
Yeah, he wasn't doing it on his own.
Yeah.
The company didn't rest on him.
Yeah.
There was a whole team willing to contribute with their own ways and lift him and each other up.
And I mean, like you said, it's some people just care about the company and the performance and hitting their targets and looking good to various stakeholders. I think the flip side of another dark side of leadership is wanting to be liked by your team too much. And I can say I have fallen into this trap in the early days, or my biggest mistake, another big mistake, and I've made quite a few as a leader, was when I gave someone who wasn't performing, I could see they had low self-esteem, instead of giving them the feedback of look, you're still not performing, but here I can help you get to that. This was maybe 6 years ago. I stayed, in the radical candor model by Kim Scott. So challenge directly, care personally. If you're challenging directly and caring personally, you're in radical candor. If you're caring personally and not challenging directly, she calls it ruinous empathy, where you're actually too afraid not to be liked as a leader. So you're really empathetic and nice, you'll get there, but you're actually cheating that person of growth and opportunity. I think that's another dark side, where if someone, it doesn't look like it because it looks like you're being nice, but you're putting your need of being liked over the need of someone else's growth, even if they can't see it at that moment. I think it's the hardest part of leadership. It can be lonely. People want to be liked. And sometimes we have to make hard decisions that are unlikable. I can say that particularly as a leader in HR, you need to make hard decisions. Ultimately, if you do it with care, if you do it with love, and you are clear and transparent, you might not be liked in the moment, but there will be a sense of respect in how you treat people.
When you were mentioning each dark side, I could think of one leader either above me or managing another team, such clear examples. And it's so interesting that we kind of adopt these characters almost in leadership, because I feel like we're just not really taught.
We're not taught. And even current leadership programs, most of the time I look at what's happening, it's like, okay, you're teaching people the nuts and bolts of, yes, they need to know how to prioritize and strategize. I'm not saying don't do that, but a large part of modules and coaching should be like, what's happening in your inner world? Because that's going to shift what happens with other areas. What are the pitfalls that you're going to fall into? And also people don't want to admit the dark. Like I've admitted 2 of my ones here. I think people are just, I have to think every first-time leader is going to suck a little bit because it's a hard craft. I think that is the hard part, is then those first-time leaders, a lot of them have never had training. So we have senior executives in most organizations to this day have never had that leadership training, or it comes into executive leadership training that doesn't go into some of the nuts and bolts. Or it teaches these things now when someone's had at least a decade plus of hardwired patterns. Or someone has to you have to hold up the mirror and have mirror moments on someone's dark behavior. Or even when that team member came to you and is like, oh, Daisy, I feel like you're micromanaging me. It's just like this little punch in the gut for that moment where you're like, oh, I thought I was doing a good job. So I think it's, how do we actually rethink about how we're talking about leadership? Why don't we talk? I think Hogan's got a say, it's an assessment, the dark side of leadership, but I don't think we talk about it enough.
No. Or we talk about the wrong things.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm just thinking back to a couple of bosses I've had male and female. There's no real change with regards to how they act. But I had this female boss who thought that she was treating all of us the same, but when, for example, lateness came in, right? I had a colleague who was always 20 minutes late, every day. And then one day I was 5 minutes late and she took me to a room and was yelling at me and was like, you're so late. You live just round the corner. There's no excuse.
Yeah.
And he was late consistently every day, 20 minutes. And I said, but he's always late. What's the dealio?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, he has an excuse. He lives an hour away.
Yeah.
So we saw the inconsistency.
Yeah.
I understand treating everyone differently because of equality, you're adapting your style to them can be a benefit. But if you're doing it like that and we see the narrative change and favoritism almost, we were just kind of there yo, she's a bully. She's yelling at me.
Yeah.
But then she was yelling at him for something else that I was doing, differently. And eventually we all submitted a bullying claim for her. And the company was like, no, she's a really high performer. She's bringing in $500,000. Can't get rid of her. And then the team left and she had no team to manage. And then she had to leave.
I think there's a lovely saying, we don't keep brilliant jerks, or Mita Malik in her book, Reimagine Inclusion, it talks about not keeping a-holes, we can't do it. And one of the first things in the company I'm working in, I sat with the leadership team and said, let's have organizational design principles. And we talked really about how do we have a principle that, irrespective of people are bringing in money or have a lot of expertise, that we don't keep people who ruin our culture and those sense of psychological safeties. But you have to consciously say, this is how we'll design our organization, and then keep people to it. But it's sad when people, want to keep people who, we can't get rid of them because of the money, and people no, not for me. This is enough. I'll pause and go back. Sometimes you have to think what is the dark side of this person's leadership? Could be from childhood or other places. I'm so curious. I'm genuinely curious. What makes people need to treat other people that way? Is it a sense of power? Is it a sense of loss of control? Probably all of the above, but it kind of goes back to, has this leader explored her dark sides of leadership, of why she does that? And I think the second thing you touched on is it seems like there's bias for different people in different circumstances. I think bias is when you talk to leaders about bias, it's a very confronting word. Because everyone's I'm not biased. Everyone's biased. Everyone's got, their prejudice. Let's just accept that. I think when people don't want to feel like they're biased, it's because they feel shame. Once again, Brené Brown, I don't want to feel shame. I'm not that. Where everyone just accepted we've all got brain biases. It's natural. How do we meet our physiology of what happens there? You feel a discomfort and you want to move away from pain and move towards pleasure in your body. And so you're no, you just tell yourself, I'm not this thing. Or no, I don't treat people different ways. I think it's up to a leader to go, what does fairness look like? And if I'm not treating people fairly, why is that? Often people can't see it. So this leader might not have even been able to know that she was treating people differently. And then it becomes, if she's not listening to the team, my bigger question is, how are leaders who have the same level of power, because there are power structures. When someone can fire you, someone has power over you, it's harder to speak up. How are leaders with similar levels of power holding up the mirror to each other? Because that's what's going to change organizations as well, is leaders having the courage. I always think of the Albus Dumbledore quote from Harry Potter, like it takes more courage to stand up to your friends than anyone else. Yeah.
But then there's the flip coin. This is why I love this topic, because there's so many areas to explore. Treating everyone the same is bad. Like, especially if you've got different genders or different cultures in the team, or neurodivergent people need a bit more assistance but no preferential treatment compared to neurotypical people. So I had to learn that the hard way as well, where I basically just I literally, like, I think it was in my first week, I was like, I don't want to like jump into things and like start working and like leading and I don't know, doing recruitment. I just wanted to sit with everyone in the team for like an hour or so and be like, what is your communication style?
Yeah.
How do you like me to speak to you?
Yeah.
Because one of them liked phone calls all the time. Another one was like, no, can you just leave me the fuck alone?
Yeah.
And unless I approach you, we're fine. So treating everyone the same, which I've had as well experience on the other side as an employee, it's hard. And I understand that's fairness.
Yeah.
But then also like putting me in the same category as like a neurotypical person who gets 8 hours sleep and has their shit together. I was like, no, like I'm here and they're here and you're expecting us to be here.
The same. Yeah. And I think there's different, when we say fairness, it talks about, I think fairness comes more through systems and processes. So like when you're doing performance reviews, everyone gets the same process. If you're doing a hiring process, you're not treating some candidates differently from other candidates as well, But I think to your point, when you're leading a team, there's that saying, there's no I in team. And I like to say, but there is an M and an E, so there is a me. So we do need to look at individuals in the context of team and adapt our styles as leaders, maybe because they're neurodivergent, maybe because they have, different needs. I think the hardest ones is where people, I think sometimes when leaders are trying to be fair and non-biased, they try and say, oh, but we're all equal. We're not all equal.
No.
We're not all equal. It's like the hardest one as a person of color is when people have said in the past, even like, different family members who are not people of color have been like, yeah, but I don't see your color. I just see you. It's like, if you don't see my color, you don't see me, because you don't see the extra hurdles or jumps I need to go to. You don't see the casual or actual racism that I face. It's the same with, neurodivergent people. I think people know that something needs to happen, but leaders are scared because they don't know how to adapt. That's another part. So I think it's more, your style was beautiful, just asking everyone what they need and how they like to work. Also how each person likes to be recognized based on what we're talking to each other, and knowing how to adapt that style. However, when it comes to different levels of systems, that we're not, we're creating fair systems for people, whether it's, like I said, performance. There's no silver bullet, and I think this is why we're still struggling, because we keep getting caught up on like the letters of diversity, equity, inclusion, instead of saying how do we actually weave it pragmatically through our day-to-day processes.
Yeah, and it is important as a leader to step into it and ask, for example, like I was doing with the team, like how do you like to be communicated and how do you like to work with me? But again, another flip side was one of the team members was fairly junior, and she just, I think, said what she thought I wanted to hear and was like, give me everything. I'm really ambitious. Like, talk to me all the time. We did that. And then she burnt out and was like, sorry, I wasn't being honest. No, I like minimal work, etc. She burnt out and she left. So it's also, again, like 360 this episode. It's also, okay, the leader, there's dark side of leadership, but also the individuals do need to claim some sort of power, some sort of boundary, some sort of voice. Because in that scenario, I thought, oh, okay.
You're doing the right thing.
I was doing the right thing. She told me, and then I know how to work with her. And then she bloody burnt out and left.
Yeah.
And then admitted that, but again, it's just that it's tough, isn't it? It's like a song and dance.
It's an art, and it's art and science. You can read as many books as you want, and it's more around running series of experiments with yourself, observing. And then I do a leadership retro at the end of every week. Like, how was my week? What did I do well? What didn't I do well? And I'm honest with my team if I need to drop balls or different things need to happen. But you're like, I can't speak in your example, but there's probably different points where maybe if, you stop and pause as a leader. When someone's starting to burn out as well, you can see the performance, like things are declining. Like, how do we have different conversations and continue to create safe spaces for people to speak up? But also, how do we hold up a mirror to people? Like, I'm doing that with team members as well. It's like, this is a lot. We don't need this much, like stop. So then they also become, it can't just all be the leader. They need to take agency, but we can hold up mirrors to them as well.
It's like any friendship, family relation or relationship, right? Even with yourself, it's continuous. You can't expect to do one thing at the beginning of your career, for example, as a leader or as an employee, set boundaries at the beginning and then expect all these months and years. You need to, like you're doing every week, retrospect.
What's happening for me? How has this changed? The other part is setting boundaries is super easy. Maintaining boundaries is super difficult.
That's what we need to have conversations about, maintaining.
Like I have a nerdy spreadsheet where I write my boundary, what that means. Then I have the irrational fear that will come up when that boundary is being crossed. Because why do we let our boundaries be crossed? There's often something that's like, oh, they'll think you're lazy or you're not good enough. And then I write like how I'll flip that fear. And then I have an SOS, like how will I know that boundary is being crossed? And then an SOS plan, whether it's talk to my coach, talk to my friend, make sure I redo my diary. It's almost like the setting boundaries, the easier part. It's almost like you need a full action SOS plan after it as well, because we all have our boundaries being crossed. And it's often, once again, back to the physiology of fear. It's the fear. And I think we talked about this once before. It's that idea of fear driving the bus. And I actually had a lovely coach say this to me. It's like, Ness, fear can have a seat on the bus. Fear is super useful. Fear can't drive the bus.
I hope not. It would crash it.
It will crash it all. That's what happens. We stop, we spin out of control. We're not happy with different things because we're driven by fear. So yeah, my hope is that people don't fight their physiology and just observe it. I think every leader, every employee feeling their emotions and then going, how do I meet myself where I'm at and honor that, and then take the next best step.
The beautiful way to end the episode, but I want you to ask your own question.
Okay.
Leave it to fate. If I can reach.
Oh my goodness. How do you want other people to feel when they are around you?
Whoa, how relevant.
Yeah. I would love other people to feel their own energy and their human potential.
Explain.
So I think everyone wants within them to find that sense of flow or meaning, whether it's in work or in life. And when I hope everyone's had that point, whether they're playing sport, in music, at work, there's this certain energy, whether it's calmness or a buzz, where you just feel like a nerdy love for your craft, whatever that is. And I know at times like I'm quite like excitable or bubbly, or when I get passionate about something like leadership, there's that energy. So I hope that either I help people mirror that when I do that, or I'm just asking questions when I meet people about them, like what makes them tick, whether it's travel, whether it's work. I want people when they're around me to feel that sense of self. And it takes me back to my MBA when I was doing one of my leadership modules, and they just put on the ground like heaps of black and white photos, and we had to choose one that resonated to us as a leader. And I picked one up of a child blowing a dandelion. And I think for me, that's it. As a leader, I want to pollinate other leaders who feel that, and everyone is a leader in any type of sense in their own life, because we're all leading self. So that energy of I matter and I'm relevant.
That was perfectly picked.
Yeah.
We did not script that. She picked it. You saw it.
Yeah.
And thank you as well so much for sharing your wisdom. Yeah. And I've honestly been self-reflecting as you've been speaking about my own management style, but also as an employee as well. It's really important to take that power back and have your voice as well. So thank you so much for sharing your empathy, your knowledge, and just validating our feelings.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.